Tēnā tātou katoa, nau mai, rarau mai nei, ki tēnei wāhanga o tēnei kōrero whakaharahara kua whakawhitia I roto I te wiki kua pāhure nei. Ko wai tēnei, ko he iri, he mokopuna tēnei no Ngāti Kaiwhata, e mihi ana ki tēnā o tātou. Kua ki whē koe noho ana, nau mai, rarau mai nei, ki wanganui a mātou. Welcome to this next session titled Fighting Fire with Water, a way to navigate organised hate. Fireside kōrero between Professor Mohan Datta and Materia Stanton today. It's our pleasure to welcome you all here. This is the wānanga that's on at the moment, just to ensure that you're at the right place. We will go into, before we do that, we're going to start with karakia. And as you can appreciate, this is quite a heavy topic for most people. So the karakia that I've selected is a karakia to clear the way for conversation and also to embolden us all to do the work of social justice, to fight that fire with water. So without further ado, karakia tātou. Manoa mai te Māori nuku, manoa mai te Māori rangi, ko te Māori ki roto I a tātou, he Māori tupua, ka pakaru mai te pō, nau mai te Māori, haumi e hui e, whai ki. And just as a really quick English translation, this karakia talks about embracing the life force of the earth, embracing the life force of the sky, embracing the life force that is within us all, to clear away hate, if you like, to clear away all barriers in the darkness, so that we can come together, be joined together in kōrero this afternoon. I believe next up is the, here we go, our community code. So for those of you that perhaps haven't been on one of the sessions yet, our community code for this kōrero is that we are curious and open and respectful, that we make generous assumptions. There is a code of confidentiality, one person, one mic. We speak from our own experience. Nobody knows everything. Together we know a lot. We make space and we also take space. We can't be articulate all of the time. And we don't take ourselves too seriously. There's some accessibility information as well. Live captions are available here. There is a website address and the session code. Please remember to put 0 at the front. There's the password as well, and enter your name, but you can ignore the organisation email address and click connect. We do have an accessibility info sheet as well. There's the URL link at the bottom there. And of course, if you have any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A and we'll aim to get to those. Perhaps we might be able to weave them throughout the session, but we'll definitely aim to get to those perhaps in the last 15 minutes or so. And right, without further ado, I would very much like to welcome our speakers. And we have first up Materia Stanton today, who is Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa in Aotearoa. She is a Pukenga Matua at the Faculty of Law at the University of Otago, and she was a Green MP for 15 years, and 9 of those years she was co-leader of the Green Party. So welcome, Materia. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have Professor Mohan Datta from Bengaluru in South Asia. He is the Dean's Chair, Professor of Communication at Massey University. His research and activism explore decolonising solidarity, justice-based organising, intersections of Indigenous, Black and migrant health, grassroots democracies, effects of hate on health at the margins, and health as a human right. His research and community-led activism span 17 countries, including Aotearoa, India, Singapore, Nepal, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, the United States of America, and China. Over the last 5 years, his activism and scholarship have examined intersections of white supremacist, far-right Zionist and Hindutva extremism, the intersections of far-right hate and their effects on health, well-being and democracy, and community-led cultural-centred strategies for countering. So welcome, Professor Mohan. Also a pleasure to have you present. Okay, without further ado, I think that's all of our housekeeping. Let me just quickly do that. And I'll just repeat the topic, which is fighting fire with water, a way to navigate organised hate. And we'll open with the first question to you, Materia, which is, could you please explain to us all what is organised hate? And if you could also please share your experiences, how you have navigated these experiences in the
Kia ora. O kia ora koutou katoa, mihi aroha kia koutou, to you, Christine and Mohan, and all of those who've organised this hui too. It's very, very nice to be here with you all and be on this panel too. It's going to be hopefully a really good and useful conversation. And yes, the material is a bit heavy, but you know, that doesn't mean, hopefully we'll have a laugh at some point about it all. Anyway, it's also very nice to see some of my colleagues actually here from Ōtepoti on the participants list, so kia ora to you. I don't know, I don't have a technical definition for organised hate. And Professor Mohan will know much more about that than I do. But I do know how it is that, well, I certainly know the impacts, but I do know how it is that it organises itself around a particular campaign or a particular group of people. And so I've got sort of different kinds of experiences that spread over the 15 years that I was in Parliament. In those early years, it was before smartphones. It was that long ago now. And so, much of it was that kind of letter writing kind of campaign stuff where people would just write you horrible letters and multiple times and threaten you with death or violence or those kinds of things. And it was, but it was kind of a bit at arm's length. There was a distance in time between them writing their letter and being mad at you and you getting that information. There was a kind of, there was some kind of distance that made it much less, just seemed to make it much less personal, even if it was organised and even if it was a campaign. Later on, and of course in 2017, it got very direct, very fast and very personal and traumatic. So, we're seeing, I know that this is, everyone knows kind of this, that we're seeing like a huge increase in the impacts and the capacity of organised hate to be able to attack a person and their community and to force them to take certain actions. In terms of politically speaking, in a general sense, one of the first really clear examples for the Green Party was in 2005 with the exclusive Brethren pamphlet campaign against the Greens. And I just raise this because, this was a pamphlet campaign. The funders were keeping themselves hidden. The people who were organising the pamphlet were keeping themselves hidden. Rod Donald and Jeanette Fitzsimons at that time, Moimara, both of them, had to hunt down the people. And I mean, they actually got information. People said, they got information that suggested where the authors and the drivers of that campaign were from. It was a hate campaign against the Greens during an election. And they had to hunt them down. Nobody could help them. Nobody was interested in helping them do this. So they literally went to their houses once they figured out who they were to confront them, to say, is this you? Are you running this pamphlet campaign against the Greens? It's full of lies. Like, where's your head at? And after that, as it was being exposed, we were getting information from overseas and others saying, this kind of concerted, organised, well-funded, hidden campaigns were increasing in the US at the time. I mean, this is 20 years ago now, really. And I don't think we really understood quite how extensive and how much it could infiltrate the way that, the way that was affecting us and how we were working. And also, I don't think we quite, because it was kind of pamphlet campaign, right? And because it was pre sort of social media, we could track it down. We could make it a bit more obvious and use the mainstream media to expose it. So it was a bit easier in some ways to deal with. It was a simpler campaign. But as time went on, of course, they became even more complicated. And certainly in 2017, after I gave my speech about having lied to Wins many years previously, the capacity for either for groups of people, and I don't know whether they knew each other or not, but I assume that they did, but for groups of people to launch multiple attacks on multiple levels that affected me, my family, my friends, my colleagues, was much, much, much more extensive and much, much more difficult to fight. Because it was multi-pronged, it was still secret, so you didn't really know who these people were. And I think that there were just all these layers. I mean, we'll get to it, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, soon, but there were just so many layers to the way that the attacks were coming that they really could not be fought off. I mean, we just couldn't fight them off. So, I think that we've just seen this explosion in the capacity for those kinds of campaigns to really attack, and to attack individuals, and to use even some of the techniques that might have been used for campaigns for good against the progressives and people on the left. So, yeah, so I have multiple kind of experiences of that, and happy to talk about that more.
Thank you for sharing that, Matiria, and no doubt we'll come back around to talk about how that there's been this explosion of campaigns over the past 20 years. And if we could go to you now, Professor Mohan, and the question for you is, you have personally faced ongoing and consistent attacks from various extremist groups, deploying disinformation and hate. How have you personally negotiated this?
Kia ora. Thank you so much for having me here, and so lovely to be in this space with you, Matiria and Christine. It just is an honor and a joy. And thank you to so many of you that have joined in the audience, and great to see so many names that we interact on X. In terms of, the personal attacks I have experienced, I want to set up a little bit of context of that, Christine. So the attacks come in the context of my academic research on the effects of hate on health, well-being, and democracy. So in that sense, I suppose the attacks are connected to my institutional functions as an academic. And I will come back to that in terms of then sort of the role of the institution in offering safeguards to people that are doing the work of studying or countering hate. At a personal level then, in terms of how one negotiates that, I suppose one can think of 3 layers of strategies. One is the institutional mechanisms. That's really the first point of contact, if you will, for so many of us that are sort of negotiating the hate within the context of our work. So going to institutional processes, looking at institutional mechanisms for safety, looking at filing police reports and complaints, complaining to NetSafe and following through with those processes. And the thing that I want to point out there in terms of that first layer then is that so much of that first layer is embedded in logics of whiteness. So the dominant values of white culture that are put forth as universal, right? And I say whiteness because the approach of whiteness to the risks then is sort of from a workplace risk management standpoint, which individualizes the risk. So it actually places the onus of negotiating the hate on the individual. So I'm supposed to, park my car in a safe space and then make sure that I'm walking in a well-lit up area. Things that you would think are quite common sense, but the onus is placed on the individual. Sort of along those lines, then, if you think about the mechanisms of NetSafe or the police, one of the things you quickly learn when you're yourself experiencing, I think that's where sort of there comes the gap between what one sees as a researcher vis-a-vis when one is turned into a subject of the research in that process, which is that the police mechanisms are quite limited. And once again, because, the hate might come in multiple languages with multiple cultural contexts and cultural codes that the police don't have the wherewithal to cope with. So there have been times where, for instance, with pretty violent rape messages I've received, I've had to translate for the police multiple times what actually was the content because they didn't have the resources to support that, And connected to that then is sort of the layer in terms of NetSafe mechanisms. NetSafe mechanisms are not really built for addressing organized hate, or when the hate takes the form of a swarm campaign and becomes viral. Because, the NetSafe report can make certain recommendations in terms of, the nature of the attack. But beyond that, it is fairly limited in terms of the legal protections it can offer you. So where in this process of negotiating hate, then where I have found sort of the solutions is at the next layer, which is in relationships and in community. I want to here give a shout out to the Manaki Collective and the work of Tina Nata. They have been amazing in terms of offering resources of support that are material and tangible, all the way from the emotional, psychosocial support to resources for tracking hate accounts to resources for security. So it's just really amazing to have that kind of infrastructure that is rooted in Maori leadership and a commitment to Te Tiriti. And hopefully that we will keep coming back to throughout this conversation. But I do really feel that Te Tiriti offers us unique anchors for challenging the hate here in Aotearoa, but also as a global model for how you fight the hate. And the final point I want to come back to is this idea of community, and notions of aroha, manakitanga, and really finding that kind of solidarity in collective bonds that are outside of that kind of individualizing logic of response, right? And I think that's where really a lot of the answers potentially lie, which is, sometimes when, and I wonder, Material, how you have negotiated this, but I've found that I'm fairly alone when negotiating the hate. You find all of a sudden that sort of the kind of complexities you're dealing with, you're quite isolated. And that isolation itself can have tremendous psychosocial effects. Did I put my fun now at risk? What are the kinds of choices I made? Were those ethical choices when you have little children into the conversation? And in that context, again, I want to highlight, I've been really amazed by the specific kind of solidarity from Maori colleagues, from Maori activists and Maori Wahine activists who have sort of been at the front of saying that, what, we will stand beside you and fight against this. And I think that kind of connection is so important to sort of counter this kind of isolated feeling.
Oh, fascinating. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I think you're right. So in 2017, I think in some other circumstances, I would have been able to keep my job, I think, in that circumstance. But the cause of my eventual resignation in 2017 was the attacks on my family and friends that could not be public. So although and I'm curious about this public versus private kind of experience, because I was having this public experience of a kind of media frenzy and kind of public attacks. But there was also this very significant and much, much more terrifying kind of private attacks that were happening at the same time. So I had family members who were being followed. There were times some family members had to give up their cell phone numbers because they were being harassed by not just individuals like randoms, but also by mainstream media, I have to say. And so there was my friends, I could see on social media that my friends were being trolled by people who were trying to gain more information about me, but in this way that suggested that my friends were being encouraged to defend me and tell more stories about me, so that to release more private information, and you could see how that was happening if you were looking at it from the outside. So it was very, very difficult to navigate those multiple attacks at the same time, and to protect family and friends from that. Like, it's when you're a public figure, like I was, there's lots of public activity that you can protect yourself against because you've got a voice, you've got access to media, you've got some power and authority to be able to stand up for yourself. But it's just not possible if they also attack everybody else around you. And so they don't, your loved ones don't have any voice to be able to stand up against it. Anything you do as a public person is only going to expose them to more harm, or the risk of more harm. So there really is very, very few options for how to manage that at all. I mean, I certainly couldn't find any, except for essentially doing what they wanted, which was to quit, which is, I mean, it's not entirely evil quitting, but I think that's where that sense of community support, it can't necessarily protect you personally or your people you love. The only people who can do that are yourself, right? But what it does do is it comes in and fills the gap that you leave. And I think that's what happened. We had the We Are Beneficiaries campaign that was led by Sam Orchard, which was just amazing. I think that campaign itself deserves a lot of attention for how, just a few people were able to bring together a whole lot of beneficiaries who were prepared to tell their stories, and then artists who came in to drive the visuals for those stories, to make all of the pictures, to paint or draw all the pictures that made that book, that then led to this big internet campaign as well around saying we are a community of people who have suffered the severity of the welfare system. There are other many more stories to tell about the impacts of unjust and cruel welfare on ordinary New Zealand people. And so that wasn't the only one. There was the I Stand With Muteria campaign that also came up with big visuals, which, visuals are important in our current media environment. And there were some terrible visuals of me at the time that really made things very difficult. So, there was kind of this counterbalance. But I always have wondered about how to understand that. But thank you, Professor, you kind of given me a way of thinking that through, that that I've always felt bad for the fact that people who wanted to protect me from that weren't able to stop the impact. And so, you know, they tried really hard to, but they couldn't stop the impact. And I've always felt bad for that. But actually what they did was they brought in a whole lot of other support for people who were not the face of the campaign and not the target, but still heard all those messages of there is a community here, there is support here, there's other people here out in the world who will support you in these kind of traumas and difficulties that you're having in that welfare space. So it's kind of, yeah, I think that's, for me at least, I think that's how the community really made a difference, is they actually supported each other and other people who didn't have the authority in space that I did to defend myself. That makes sense. Yeah.
I'm just really interested in, as I was listening to you, Matiria, you know, I could just see these colonizing logics that were just behind driving all of this, these messages of hate towards you at the time and towards, you know, beneficiaries. And of course, you're a Māori woman. And I just wondered if, Professor Mohan, if you could just talk about a little bit about that, the drivers, what's behind all this, these mobilizing, this, what it seems to be ramped up mobilizing efforts of hate at the moment, particularly towards people of color as well. I wondered if you could share your knowledge of that with us.
Kia ora, namihi. Please call me Mohan, you know. But, you know, so when, and this goes back to the question you right? There is often a tendency for us to treat organized hate as if it is just an object without an underlying infrastructure. And it's really important to look at that underlying infrastructure. And as Matiria's sharing of that narrative, it is so powerful because what it tells you is that there is a political economy of hate, right? There are powerful economic interests that are invested in shutting down welfare. And of course, there is also a racial capitalism that seeps into every pore of the settler colonial project. So at the heart of it is the targeting of Maori women in extremely racialized ways. And Matiria kind of alluded to this notion of the same unmarried Maori women or unmarried Maori women who have children. So, and this was the same kind of narrative you see, for instance, in the attacks on the Black welfare mother in the US. So this has imprints of white supremacy all over the place. But it is also, I would think, Christine, in some ways, an economic and political project. So now we are talking about the Atlas Network here in Aotearoa and the work of Professor Jeremy Walker, and then you know, the piece that Mihirangi Forbes did on Atlas Network and the Voice campaign, targeting the Voice campaign in Australia. And what the Atlas Network is it's a network of sort of powerful foundation-based organizations that are connected to the extractive industries, that are connected to the tobacco industry, and they are fundamentally interested in two things. One is to push the agenda of extractive capital and to push sort of policies that deregulate tobacco, right? And we are seeing that right in play here in Aotearoa. But connected to that then is the attack on welfare, the privatization of education and public schooling systems. These are all intertwined, and underneath that sits a white supremacist logic. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, Christine, is that we often think of white supremacists or extremists, for instance, as the KKK or the Proud Boys, sort of as a very extreme elements of that hate. But then you also have what would consider fairly mainstream arms of the hate in terms of political parties that mainstream that hate or that hate rhetoric. If you look at some of the rhetoric of ACT or New Zealand First, that's the mainstreaming of the rhetoric. But you also look at media platforms such as The Platform or Reality Check Radio, or journalists like Carl Dufresne and Sean Plunkett. These are infrastructures that are normalizing this extremist white supremacist hate. So in some ways, Christine, I feel that it's a whole ecosystem that is organized in order to sort of target the poor, attack low-income communities, attack indigenous communities, people of color, and uphold the racial capitalist infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that kind of got lost in 2017. Like, my disclosure came off the back of a policy proposal to remove the relationship penalties that solo parents face, because the rationale for that is really obvious, that actually if it is safer and better and financially better for sole parents to have a partner. It makes it easier to do their work. They have a loving relationship. There's a whole lot of reasons why that's really good, but the welfare system penalizes people, particularly women, for entering into or exploring those relationships to see if they'll work. So they end up being trapped into either really abusive ones or extractive relationships, or just a kind of there's a whole lot of issues with that. But so we were at the time in 2017, we were announcing policy that would undo that punitive approach to solo parents, so that they have more freedom and more rights to be able to have relationships like everybody else gets to. But at the time when we were drafting that policy, we were advised that that the first thing that would come to mind is that it would be called slut funding. That would be the phrase used if we were to have a policy that enabled people to be to have the financial support they needed to take care of their kids and be able to have healthy or explore healthy relationships and healthy partnerships, which at the time was completely shocking. We were quite gobsmacked with that. But which goes directly to this idea of women being, because that's, we still, when people talk about solo parents, they still think in their mind solo mums, women being highly sexualized, that a woman who has children and is not partnered is, I don't know quite how to use the words, but there's this absolute misogynistic attitude towards them and their well-being and their agency and their ability to make decisions for themselves and for their children. There's a huge kind of like, to be unattached and to have children is to be displaying your sexuality, which is then also stomped on as part of that kind of capitalist, sexist, and I think in Aotearoa in particular, very racist attitude towards women and their children if they are unpartnered. And it was amazing to see how easily all of those things were triggered. It was instantaneous after that speech in 2017 that talked about all of those things, because it's such a prevalent like surface kind of attitude. And I think it's an extremist attitude too. And I don't think it's about extremist KKK Proud Boys kind of. I think it's just like this really conservative extremism, if that's a thing, about other people and particularly about Māori women. I think it's, Māori women will always be at the most hottest and pointiest end for those things.
That I guess there is a question in the chat, one question about women, but we've just, heard you explain how Māori women have often been the targets of organised hate, and this really has gone back in history for many decades. Randolph has popped in the chat here that Kathy Blee in the US has documented the role of women in the growth and maintenance of organised hate groups throughout New Zealand history. Throughout US history, sorry. do you feel that women have taken on a particular role in organised hate campaigns here in Aotearoa? Possibly he's meaning in fighting that, and perhaps in fighting organised hate. Have women been at the forefront of solidarity like Mohan was explaining before, or in leading campaigns against hate?
Mohan, does your research say anything about that? Because I wouldn't know. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself. I was a little bit confused about that question in terms of women's role in organizing hate and then women's role in resisting that hate. I think the way, Christine, you interpreted it is in terms of the resistance. The other part also is sort of the role of women in the organizing of hate. So maybe I can talk a little bit about what the research points to with the first end of it, which is indeed, whether it is with far-right Zionism or with Hindutva or with white supremacy, I'm interested in looking at the intersections of these three hate groups. Women play a critical part of that infrastructure of hate because the nature of the hate is also gendered, and it plays along gendered lines to uphold the hate, particularly in terms of defining the role of women in protecting the purity of the race, and that part of the campaign infrastructure certainly draws on women who are recruited into hate groups to uphold it. So you have seen, for instance, in the work of the Disinformation Project and Kate Hanna that have pointed to various kinds of women's networks that operate to uphold white supremacist concepts and ideas. Similarly, in the context of US, for instance, you see the ways in which white women are recruited into racializing the hate, particularly around rape narratives that target, say, African-American men specifically. I would love to hear, Materia, your thoughts on that. In terms of resistance, of course, there is so much in terms of the role of women in resistance, also particularly in terms of centering feminist values. And, I think of the work of Bell Hooks, who has inspired my own thinking so much. And I think, ideas of radical love, a radical community, which redefine the very notions of relationships and relationality, how we relate to each other, to redefine ideas of how we connect to each other that can perhaps challenge this hate infrastructure. And as I was saying, personally, what I've experienced, Christine, in Aotearoa is that oftentimes the first line of defense when I've personally experienced the hate are often Maori women colleagues, Maori women activists who have stood up knowing that they would face the hate when they stood up to say something or to counter the hate. So I think there is so much to be said about love, connection, but also about courage and gendered ways of doing courage, maybe.
Yeah. I think I was thinking courage too was kind of the word that was in my mind. I think, I think here in Aotearoa, Māori women in particular, I talk about who I know, Māori women have fought for themselves and their whānau for forever. So it's not, I think it is integral to the way that Māori women understand themselves and their whānau and are connected to their tikanga, that there just is no choice about being in that position of standing up. But that doesn't mean that we're not either women or Māori, we don't all think the same all the time. So, we're going to have different views, and, there's some Māori women in Parliament at the moment, for example, who have very different views about, but there is still that sense that at some point, having to stand up and support Te Tautoko Te Manaaki and not just to support in that sense, but to actually fight for the mana of the people, of the women around you who are under attack, or the people around you who are under attack. It feels very natural. It comes in many different forms, but it's really, I think there's that real solidarity for Māori women in particular, and you can feel it when you are, like I certainly did. Just when in 2017, you know, I traveled up and down the country after the speech, and I just had, I don't know, it felt like hundreds, who knows, just every day, women, and Māori women in particular, saying, you know, that was me, or that was my mother. Lots and lots of people saying that was us too. You know, we belong to this community with you, and we're here to do whatever we can to make this, you know, survivable for you, whatever. It was a kind of unrelenting kind of field of love, really. That was really, really present, really easy. Like it was just delivered everywhere I went, and that lasted for a long time too. It went on. It wasn't just in that immediate after the speech period, but it went on for another few years, and people still talk to me about that sense of feeling like they belonged to me and to that community, and that they wanted to show their aroha and be part of the aroha that was being expressed for people, for beneficiaries in general, and me in particular. So yeah, I think it's really powerful. I guess that's why we're talking about, you know, fighting fire with water, because it's not like, you know, we're not fighting hate with hate. We're fighting hate with love, and it's very, very different. It feels harder, but it is actually what is going to make the difference in the end, I think. I mean, Mohan, you would have, you know, talked to people about solutions and strategies and ways to actually use connection and relationships, like you've said, and love as a way to deal with organised hate, and I think it can work.
Thank you for sharing that, Machidi. And yes, I do remember back in those days when you had given your resignation speech, and I was a solo mum at the time, and I just felt such heartfelt gratitude to you for being so courageous. And yeah, it just felt like you were speaking for me, felt like you were speaking for my cousin, for my auntie. Yeah, so just, I'll never forget it. And which brings me on to the part about solutions that you were talking about, and that Mohan has walked us through some solutions. One being Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a framework for resisting or actually countering the hate. I wonder if you could, you know, like give us a bit more of your wisdom around that, more, or both of you. Yeah, what are your thoughts on us being able to utilise Te Tiriti o Waitangi to counter hate?
Materias Tauiwi, I will defer to you, and then I can pick up.
No, well, just kia ora, Christine. It's nice. Thank you for those words. It's really still makes a big difference. You go, Mohan. I'll get myself together.
So much aroha. You know, when I think of Te Tiriti, Christine, as an anchor to challenging this hate, I think about this idea that, you know, I did this TikTok video where I said that as a migrant, I derive my rights from Te Tiriti. So, I mean, it was a fun, creative exercise. And I thought, you know, what would it be like if I were to just say that rather than this white framework that sort of selects migrants, who is the deserving migrant to come in, to just play with this idea of Te Tiriti being an invitation, being an opening, and being the source of rights for migrants. And what was really striking with that, it was a really positive message, I felt, it was the amount of hate and white supremacist hate I was inundated with. And it was quite striking because it was in the backdrop of the We Are All Equal campaign that was targeting the migrant community, trying to tell the migrant community that Te Tiriti takes away from migrant rights. So all these co-governance stuff takes away from migrant rights. So you should really be voting for these right-wing parties, right? And you scratch the surface of that divide and rule policy, and the white supremacist hate comes pouring. So in that sense, I really think that if you think about Te Tiriti as an anchor, it allows us to play with imaginations that are outside of the realm of this infrastructure of white supremacy. And in my sort of theoretical work, as you know, Christine, I sort of see hate as intertwined with white supremacy, so to step outside of that then in some ways is to step outside of the logics of that infrastructure in itself, and then to ask what other kinds of imaginations can we have. So Te Tiriti as a source of rights for migrants, it's such a radical way of thinking about how we belong in Aotearoa as migrants. And that would mean that as a migrant, I need to learn about Te Tiriti and learn about what is my responsibility to upholding Te Tiriti and honoring it and relating to Tangata Whenua. And that being the space as opposed to where I sit in the infrastructure of whiteness established within the structures of white supremacy, where I'm always going to be a loser because I'm never going to measure up to that structure of whiteness, even though I might aspire to it and I might have internalized so much of it because of my own colonial history and baggage,
Just on that note, please, Mohan, would you be able to tell us in ordinary people terms exactly what is whiteness? I'm just thinking for the audience who might, we all probably have our different thoughts on what that is, but when you're talking about it, what are you referring to it as?
Great question. So to me, whiteness is sort of the value of dominant white culture that is very specific and that is cultural, but that works to erase that cultural root of it, and then it establishes itself as universal. So it goes all the way from doctrine of discovery, papal bulls, the establishing of the laws and policies in terms of international laws of property, to how science is constructed, such that then anything that is outside of it is cultural and then has to fight for legitimacy because whiteness is the universal through which we are working. Does that make sense, Christine?
Yeah.
Yes, and then so when anything that is outside of those norms of whiteness, so like when Metiria did her speech, and she revealed, what she had to do to survive when she was a beneficiary, that's when that whiteness just comes and bombards you because it's outside what they considered to be the cultural norms.
Yes. Yeah. So I would just give one example, and I would love to hear, Metiria, your thoughts on this. For instance, I've written quite a bit on whiteness, free speech, and democracy. And, in that work, and that has resulted in quite a bit of hate, right? But in that line of work, and Christine, you wrote a paper in that special issue we edited on free speech and whiteness. And I argue that sort of the decorum or the civility politics of whiteness starts falling apart the moment it is threatened, and it becomes all ugly and its hate starts becoming evident. Of course, for saying that, whiteness will come back at you and target you and say that, oh, you're racist, which is what I've been dealing with over the past 5-6 years. But I think there lies a critical point that ideas such as liberty, when Mill was writing about liberty, was writing within the context of being employed by the East India Company in India while serving the East India Company and sitting over a colonial loot, right? So it is really interesting when ideas of freedom and liberty have been developed in these structures of whiteness. They have been developed while carrying out colonial takeover of land, colonial loot, colonial theft, and destruction and genocide of indigenous people and people of color across the global south. So, there is nothing pretty about whiteness, and this is the thing, right? That it's codes of, as we are seeing play out in Palestine right now, in Gaza right now, that its codes of civility start falling apart and it starts showing its color the moment its political, economic, and colonial interests are threatened.
That makes so much sense, and thank you for that sort of description of whiteness. That's definitely how it felt in 2017, like a wall of whiteness, this kind of perspective of what was normal and right, and just with no room for any kind of conversation at all about actual lived experience of actual people. It was yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's really nice to hear you talk about Te Tiriti offering the framework for countering hate, because I think that's absolutely true, that we need to keep reiterating as much as possible in all the different ways. Te Tiriti offers us the chance and the way to live here in a really respectful, really understanding and connected kind of way. It's based, if we understand it's based in tikanga Māori, which is whakapapa and whanaungatanga, then we create connection from the minute that we arrive here in whatever different forms that we arrive. Through the birth canal, on a boat, whatever it is. But it's just the sense that there is a underlying tikanga here that instantaneously creates that connection. And it just reminded me, you know, I teach tikanga Māori law here at the law school, and you know, teaching to tauira the difference between tikanga Māori and, you know, second law, the law of Cook's law, is really about this idea of starting to undo the sense that we have this individual autonomy that is very separated from other people, that we don't have a kind of direct responsibility to the other people around us, that connection is less important than autonomy. And in tikanga Māori, and in, I think, the way that we can operate here is if we understand connection is the most important thing, that having relationships and the responsibilities that those relationships create then creates the community that provides enormous amount of connection and opportunity as well, an opportunity for mana, opportunity to do new and exciting things, but based on, first and foremost and always, that connection first. And then we can, you know, that is the way that we need to be considering ourselves in what is a colonized country that isn't going to be it's not going to be uncolonized anytime soon. It's not likely that you know, there'll be some kind of secession or we will be emancipated, or any of those things are not actually they're just not likely. You know, we see it in some other countries, but I don't think we're going to see it in ours anytime soon, partly because we're so interconnected by making babies, by making Māori babies, I have to say. So, you know, there's this kind of like, I think there is a connection we've already made here, and we're not going to disconnect from each other. So the more we can keep on talking about relationships, love, connection, and living that in the different ways that we can, and teaching it in the different ways that we can, it's got to form the basis of what a real Te Tiriti relationship looks like in the future. Because, you know, we're not that far away from the 200th anniversary commemoration, or whatever it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be in 2040. You know, we really have to keep articulating our values as we go, as we head towards 2040, just to keep reminding people that we all do actually belong here, just in different ways and different experiences of doing so.
That's beautiful, and so you know, awesome target to head towards, to keep our eyes on as we steer towards 2040. I just wondered whether either of you have any, because we're getting near to the end, and there don't appear to be any more questions in the Q&A section. So do any of you have any concluding remarks, wisdom, gems, insights that you would like to share with us all? Shall we start with you, Mohan?
You know, I wanted to just say it is so inspiring to be in this space once again with you, Christine, and with you, Materia. You're such an inspiration. And I want to connect, you know, the lessons I've learned from listening to your speeches and something I see happen here in Highbury, you know, in Papaya, in a space where, you know, our center care has been privileged to work alongside communities negotiating hardships and poverty. And, so I wanted to give the example of this community garden as a community space that is built together through really the leadership of Maori women, and then bringing in migrant and particularly refugee communities in growing the garden. And what has really been beautiful about witnessing that work is how that connection grows through the growing of food, through the sharing of food, and then through the sharing of cultural festivals and knowledge systems, really, about how to watch the moon, how to watch the times of the year, how do you plant, and sharing those knowledge systems in that kind of way. And in doing that work, in growing food, they also build that space for social cohesion through connection with each other. So I want to just wrap up with this idea, and just taking the example of food as one way of, and what we grow as one way of finding how we connect with each other, that sort of bypasses the disinformation and hate infrastructure of white supremacy and creates its own interconnected radical logics, And I just wrote a piece about what organizing is going to look like at the world's end, sort of as we sort of prepare for climate catastrophe, as we are in the midst of it. And what I find hope is in the power of communities at the very margins across Indigenous and Global South contexts to find connection, to find ways of building networks and linkages with each other, and to still keep intact knowledge systems in spite of centuries of cognitive epistemicide and colonial epistemicide, right? That this has sustained, and that's, to me, the power of hope and community.
I think, it's been awesome talking with all of you, including the people who are watching. It's nice seeing your comments too. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. I think one of the things I always thought was that the connector between the force that creates poverty and the force that creates climate change is greed. Right, greed is what is drives, I think, both of those, personal, institutional, in any way you want to think about it. So so what is an antidote to greed? And the greed is, one antidote is that sharing. There's sharing, like you're talking about, Mohan, whatever it is that we got to share, and it might be in the community gardens, or it might be in cooking, or it might be in sharing knowledge, or it might be in sharing voice. Whatever it is that we have to share, we share, because that is what creates the connection and the relationships that keeps us safer in the face of real threat. It can't always keep us safe as such. It can't always protect us from those forces of greed, but it can keep us safer, and we can find places to recover when things don't go as you expect. And I think that is always going to be what I hold on to too, as hope for our future in a climate changing world, and a world where poverty and war is increasing and pervading all of our daily lives in some form or another. We just have to stay on the kaupapa, not let them take us off the kaupapa, and we will get there in the end. So I don't think I have any wisdom, but I just think we would just keep offering ourselves in service to each other, and eventually, we'll get what we need the most. Yeah. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for that, Matidia. And just on that note of, offering ourselves in service to each other and to community, I just want to thank you both. We are immensely grateful for the time you've taken to share with us, to revisit some, traumatic experiences. I acknowledge Julie for posting that in the chat too. Thank you both so much for walking us down the path of ways of navigating hate, which is just with aroha, with love, with community, sharing, you know, probably everything that isn't capitalist or neoliberal in nature. And there is one last question in the chat. Have we got any time? There's 1 minute left. Oh, is there any formulation in legalese that captures the concept of love or aroha? That's by Dirk. Yeah, there you go. Materia will ask.
That captures the concept of love or aroha. No, I don't think we need to make it. We don't need to make it legal. We just keep doing it, whether it's legal or not. That's. I think we've seen enough campaigns of love over the many decades of Aotearoa New Zealand's history to know that love is a force in itself. Kia ora.
Right. Kia ora, tēnā kōrua. So I'll just end off with a karakia that's going to kind of release any bonds or any entanglements that we may have experienced through this kōrero, but actually coming to the end of it, I feel like quite, I don't know about you both, but I feel quite light. You know, it wasn't a heavy experience that I thought it might be. I hope that was the way for the audience. And so he karakia to share for us all. I'm pretty sure maybe some of you know it already. It's quite a common one. Inuhia, inuhia, inuhia. Inuhia I te uru tapunui a tāne. Kia wātea, kia māma. Kia wātea, kia māma te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara tangata. Haumie, hui, tai, ki.